originating from the podcast studio inside FAM 360's headquarters in Atlanta, Georgia. This is the Above and Beyond Leadership Podcast. The Above and Beyond Leadership Podcast is designed to encourage, equip, and inspire our audience through a combination of inspirational stories and real-life experiences shared by other successful and skilled leaders in a variety of vocations. We hope that the Above and Beyond Leadership Podcast empowers each one of us to step out, step up, and ultimately thrive as leaders. Now here's our host, Mr. Matt Maloney.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Above and Beyond Leadership Podcast. I am your host, Mr. Matt Maloney. I am really excited to have our guest back in studio today. If you didn't catch the first episode, go back and listen to it with Miss Helen Appleby. Helen is a British, New York-based women's leadership expert who has helped hundreds, perhaps even thousands, or maybe even tens of thousands through now her book, women step into their power and write their own rules for success while also helping hundreds of men and perhaps thousands, certainly this man right here, understand how best to support those women. She's a dynamic woman who's had a dynamic career, and I'm super thankful to have her back in studio with us today. Welcome back, Miss Helen Appleby.
Thank you, Matt.
You know, in the book, you talk about a number of different skills that women need to cultivate and build on, some of which we're kind of talking about. This is navigating that and obtaining a sponsor and mentorship, and you can develop skills through mentors, obviously. But you talked about one skill, influencing skills, and you talked about other skills. What would you say, I guess two questions. One, influencing skills, talk about that, because I find it very important. I think influencing skills and understanding even what that is so important. And then maybe share on the tail end of that another skill that you think is critical for navigating success and growth within the workplace for women.
I'm kind of going to mix the two together because they kind of naturally fall together. And to be clear, I think influencing skills, and the second one that I'm going to talk about, which is stakeholder management, they're not necessarily, some of the skills that I talk about in my book are very different for women and for men. Right? So negotiation, for instance, is one which is very, very different. How you might approach a negotiation, Matt, that what might work for you is often not what will work for me as a woman, right? So influencing skills is less critical, but for me, I wish I'd learned it earlier on my career journey and learned how to do it well, right? How to listen, really deeply listen, which I did. What I didn't do is I didn't demonstrate listening. So as you're trying to bring someone with you on a journey, then listening and demonstrating listening so that they feel heard is really important, right? Using facts as well as stories or emotions is also really important, and understanding who your audience is. What are they likely to be influenced by? Is it facts or is it emotions and stories? Often it's both, but you've got to really think that through. You're talking to someone in finance or regulatory, they're really not so interested in, the heartbreaking patient stories that you also might know when you work for a pharmacy. They want like, how much does it cost?
Yeah, right.
And then looking for a win-win solution, right? That win-lose, win-win, lose-lose, win-lose, right? That kind of, those four types of outcomes in a scenario, and looking for how can you find win-win? How can I get what I want and you get what you want, Matt, as we move through this, looking for that. And part of that, though, does rely on me having really listened to you to understand even what you might want, right? Because what you might want might be really easy for me and free, right? You might just want recognition. You might just want me to say, thanks to Matt, we were able to do this, right? And that might be enough. But, so getting to win-win. And then the final thing that, is often really helpful to shift people and influence them is to link to a higher purpose.
No doubt.
Something that we're both really care about, So Matt, can we do this with this podcast recording time, right? And can that work for you too? And thank you for your flexibility. I know we're both trying to make a difference in leadership
Yeah.
and, help each other. That sense, and there's always, on some level, almost always, if you work for the same company, some kind of higher purpose. And the more mission driven your organization is, and the more clearly the leaders in the organization have done that, often the clearer it is. I mean, I came from pharmaceuticals, so, the patient.
It's very mission driven. Yeah.
It is mission driven,
Yeah.
right? But there's always something that, we both care about. So doing that. And then I think the other one, the kind of the one that links to that, so those are influencing skills. But I think one of the piece that it took me a while to learn was this whole concept of stakeholder management, or as I like to describe it, the meeting happens before the meeting. I think early in my career, I just assumed that if I did good work and that I'd get noticed.
Yeah.
We already talked about
Yeah.
that. But if I did good work and showed up at the meeting and went, like the French waiter, with the platter with the lid on it, and you go taran taran tara,
Yeah.
here it is. Oh, isn't it amazing? That doesn't really work. And that, sometimes some people will be like, oh, it's amazing, and some people will be like, oh, I wasn't involved in that. Do my team know that? And did you ask me about that? And I don't think that's going to work for me.
Yeah.
Right? And it doing it like that can just cause debate and delay. So if the meeting happens before the meeting, part of influencing skills is really saying, okay, if there's this decision, right? If I'm going to ask for money, for instance, right, to do this, who's going to be in the room or consulted? And, back to our other example about our careers, are they red, yellow, or green? And that, the higher you rise in the organization, honestly, the more of your job is that stuff. It's no longer your job to do the work. It's your job to make sure the right work gets done. But that stuff sometimes is the stuff that only you can do as a leader and as a senior leader. And I kind of resented that. It was like, oh God, more stuff to do. But it's actually really important. And again, it's a career accelerator. It helps you lead the organization more effectively.
That's fascinating. That's great. Thank you for sharing that. And it's so much wisdom in what you talked about there. We could talk about that for hours. I do have a question though. As a man, you talk about how men can be a source of change. And for the men listening, including myself, what are some ways that men can help develop women into their leadership roles?
For men who want to help, in the book, I actually wrote an afterword, a whole chapter for men who want to help. And, I ask a series of questions in that chapter. The first of which is, are you working for an organization, or are you a leader that you would want your daughter to work for? Right? Would you want your daughter to work in your organization or in your team?
Yeah.
And if the answer to that is no, what are you doing about it? And, we're not all CEOs, but even within your team, you can make a difference. And I outlined specifically a number of those changes that you can make. One of them is listening to women. It's unconscious, but the research shows that men interrupt twice as much as women do in meetings. Twice as much. And even more importantly, 3/4 of the time when they interrupt women. So my question is, are you listening? Are you really listening? Are you listening to understand? Are you listening to women, or are you listening to interrupt?
Are you already formulating your response, or you already...
Right, that's listening to interrupt.
That's right. That's right. So true.
Right. So, and watching for that in the meeting, if you're leading a meeting, is that happening in the room? Let her finish is a great line. And, and as women, by the way, for the women listening, we don't get off scot-free either. This is something we need to watch because, women interrupt less than men, but we also interrupt other women more than we interrupt men. It's all unconscious, but some of this unconscious stuff as a male leader or as a senior leader can really, really help. So watching the interrupting. And then I alluded to it before. Do you remember when I was talking about Stan, this thing around, women get promoted based on their track record and men get promoted based on their potential? So in a discussion about a new role or in some kind of talent review, right, watching that you're holding women to the same standard as men. Are you judging them the same way? And another way of, thinking about that is, as you're describing someone, their achievements or their character, would we say the same if Helen was called Harry? So the research shows, if you show, they did an experiment at Harvard where they showed the same resume for someone, a woman, and a man, and they only changed their name. And when the when the perceptions of the person in the resume were compared, it was Heidi and Howard. That was the only word they changed on the resume. Heidi and Howard were rated as equally competent, but Howard was rated as significantly more likable and someone that I would prefer to work with. And they only changed one word on the resume.
Wow.
So, are you holding women to the same standard?
So good.
Things to think about.
Well, stepping outside the book for a second, just focusing on developing women in leadership roles and your coaching, what are the rules you coach most often on? Or perhaps what are some of the things that you try to impart upon some of your people that you're coaching, your mentees, if you will, in that?
Coaching clients.
Thank you.
I think, honestly, Matt, at the heart of any coaching journey is self-awareness. I think, and on a one-on-one basis, I get to that kind of self-awareness through the 360 interview process. But even, when we're doing it within the course, the Unwritten Rules course, really there's a section in there on personal branding, and asking for feedback and asking how you are perceived can be really, really powerful. So as a leader, knowing what we're good at is the foundation of everything. And then knowing and seeing the rest through, not what are we not good at, and that's it, we're stuck with it for life, but instead, how can we grow? What's the next level of growth for us? And that's really the core of, the kind of growth mindset. It's all about growth for me, whether it's one-on-one or in the group. And once you know where your growth areas are, how do you then kind of skill up and grow and develop and expand? Like not become you, but how can you expand your range in some of these areas?
That's great. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. So I want to finish with two final questions because we're almost at the end of our time today. First question is for you. What dreams, goals, aspirations? What are the next things that you're working on? What's next for Helen?
I'm loving my mission, Matt. I think it's the continuation of the mission of, how can I make corporate life healthier? And, the way that I've chosen to do that is through coaching very senior leaders, male and female, one-on-one, and in group settings through the course. And the group coaching is helping women navigate and succeed. And that, the course is out there in the world and really building community, right? One of the things we haven't actually talked about this, but one of the things that was very present for me, Matt, on my journey as a woman, especially if you're working in a male-dominated environment or a competitive environment, is that this can feel really lonely.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Navigating as a woman. And so community and connection and sisterhood, I call it, has been really important for me on that journey. And I want to bring that through the course and the community around the Unwritten Rules, right? Helping women write their own rules, step into their power, and navigate their version of success together.
That's great. So last question, so you're an author, you've written a book, but when the books are written about you, at the end of your life and the books are written about you, what do you hope that they most say about you and your impact?
I guess that's the word, right? I hope they'll talk about my impact and how I help to make corporate life healthier, how I help support women and, bring sisterhood to the world. And ultimately, making corporate life healthier is some part of that, and some part of my mission is bringing more love into the world.
Helen, it's been a privilege to have you on the podcast today. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule. I know you're busy with coaching your clients and working on perhaps another book or whatever it might be, but I know you're busy. So thank you for joining us today. It's been inspiring to me, as I told you earlier in the podcast, that reading your book was inspiring to me and really just powerful. It welled up a sense of different emotions in me, specifically because I am a father to daughters, and it really touched me. So thank you for that, and thank you for spending time with us. I'd like to close with a quote. It's from Princess Diana, actually. Each person is born with very individual qualities and potential. We as a society owe it to women to create a truly supportive environment in which they too can grow and move forward. To all of our listeners and subscribers out in podcast land, thank you for joining us today. I hope today's episode was both inspirational and empowering. And as we go out upon our days, I pray and hope that each of our days are filled with opportunities to lift others up as we aim to go above and beyond. Thanks, everyone.
Our executive producer and host is Matt Maloney, President and CEO of FAM360. Strategic Communication Coordinator, Michelle Ducato. Production assistance by Tin Dog Studios. Director, John Berland. Creative Assistant, Whitney Berland. Theme song, Connecting Dots by Curtis Cole, provided by Artlist. Please subscribe today and don't miss any of our weekly episodes.